Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Billy has to make a decision. Billy's decision on Kane's offer worries Sally. Residents of Genoa City will experience numerous significant changes. One character's business choice that can end their relationship is revealed in this week's preview for The Young and the Restless, while another character gets ready for the Tessa received two major bombshells from Mariah last week. She first planned to travel to Boston in order to get assistance for her problems. Second, Mariah attempted to kill a guy, which is the cause of her actions. Tessa was taken aback by Mariah's admission, which cast doubt on the couple's future. Mariah is getting ready to travel to Boston this week, but not before attending to some business. She arranges for Daniel to meet her alone in the park, most likely to talk about Tessa. While she is away, Mariah may ask Daniel to watch Tessa and Aria. However, when Tessa and Daniel become closer while she is away, she will come to regret that choice. Billy and Sally are in danger. Billy Flynn's character, Kane, made an offer to defeat Victor, Billy's longtime rival. Billy was cautioned by Sally not to get connected with Kane since she didn't like the concept. Billy, however, finds the proposition too alluring to refuse. Sally wants someone to talk to because Billy doesn't care about her feelings. When she reaches the Abbott mansion, Diane inquires about Billy's well-being. Billy is about to make the biggest mistake of his life, replies an agitated Sally. Billy's encounter with Kane on the train is the turning point in his life. Kane claims that by accepting Victor's offer, Billy will be able to get revenge on him at last. Billy watches unsurely as Kane pleads once more. Will Billy take a chance on his relationship with Sally by accepting the offer? Or will Kane's strategy require him to locate a new partner? Their departure. This is a preview of what September 15th to 19th will bring. Jack becoming involved in the Newman's affairs, Mariah calling out Daniel on what's been happening with Tessa, Lily flipping a fresh page and finding an old tale on it, and Billy dealing with personal and professional problems. For all the details, continue reading. Devon urges his sister to start over while Lily deals with Kane and grieves for Damien. Phyllis and Michael declare a ceasefire after being on the outs since the lawyer took Sharon's case, which, incidentally, she was innocent of. Another day, another storyline. Kane tells Amanda about his new plan. Has he ever completed anything on his previous agenda? Kyle is compelled to choose the high road, which is the less traveled path in his opinion. Adam places Chelsea in a difficult situation. We get closer to this tragic turn of events when Sally refuses to back down from Billy. As Victor multitasks to defeat his opponents, his desk must be cluttered with post-it notes and to-do lists. Kane requests that Billy reconcile with Jill, Billy's mother, despite the fact that she has always preferred Kane, the fictional son. Jack warns Nikki, and somewhere Victor is undoubtedly furious. Meet the gorgeous character who was recently cast as a potential love interest on Bold and Beautiful. Jack asks Victoria, his ex-stepdaughter, for assistance. We hope Lily is too intelligent to fall for Kane's nonsense once more. However, he succeeds in winning back the affection of his ex-wife, whom he repeatedly shattered. Daniel is confronted by Mariah regarding Tessa. Lauren goes above and beyond to win Christine over before leaving for the wedding. Billy experiences a setback in spite of his drive to win back Chancellor and his faith that he will succeed. There will be danger when Noah returns. Here's why. Kane organizes a brainstorming session. But after his last gathering ended in 3 fatalities, who would go to any meeting with him? Billy Abbott's mind was a storm, the kind of storm that left no sky untouched and no horizon safe, because the decision he had to make carried not only the weight of his own future but the precarious balance of Sally's heart, Kane's schemes, Victor's wrath, and the shifting foundations of Genoa City itself. And though on the surface it might have seemed like a business choice, a straightforward yes or no, to an offer whispered in dim corners and sharpened by decades of rivalry, it was so. Much more than that, it was the choice between continuing a cycle of vengeance that had defined his adulthood and poisoned his every attempt at peace, or finally stepping away, allowing the ghosts of past grudges to rot quietly in history while he built something new. But Kane, slick as oil and twice as dangerous, knew precisely which words to press into Billy's ear, painting the picture of a world where Victor Newman finally paid for every humiliation, every undermining blow, every stolen opportunity, And though Sally's voice still rang in Billy's chest, pleading, warning, begging him not to tether himself to Kane's self-destructive vendetta, Billy's hunger for justice, or perhaps just the illusion of control, gnawed harder. And meanwhile across town Mariah Copeland was spinning her own web of chaos, dropping bombshells that left Tessa reeling. Because what partner expects to hear that not only is their love preparing to vanish to Boston for help but that in the shrouded darkness of a broken mind, they once attempted to end another man's life, and the admission shattered the delicate framework of trust the two women had painstakingly rebuilt after years of obstacles, leaving Tessa staring at the woman she adored and wondering whether she had ever truly known her at all. And now Mariah's upcoming trip carried the weight of a test, a dangerous space where Tessa would be left with her own doubts and fears while Daniel, steady, loyal, but also carrying his own quiet ache for connection, would be drawn closer to her, a proximity that could very well crack open a temptation neither of them had asked for but neither might resist. And the irony was bitter, because Mariah in her desperation to protect Tessa and Aria was unknowingly planting the seeds of her own heartbreak, even as the rest of Genoa City braced for shifts that promised to reshape every alliance. From Devon gently urging Lily to rewrite her life without the shadow of Kane, to Jack's reluctant entanglement in Newman drama, to Phyllis and Michael calling a fragile truce over battles that had already scorched half the town, and yet all eyes, inevitably, returned to Billy, because his crossroads was not simply about Kane's whispered deal, it was about whether he was willing to gamble his fragile bond with Sally, a woman who had stood at his side despite the whispers, despite her own instincts telling her she deserved better, and when she stormed into the Abbott mansion, her hands trembling and her voice sharp, confessing to Diane that Billy was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. It was less about Kane's plan and more about the dread pooling in her stomach that she was losing him to the very same obsession that had destroyed his happiness time and time again. And the cruelest part was that Billy himself knew she was right, knew that every time he had chased revenge, it had ended in fire. Yet still, when he sat across from Kane on that rattling train, the countryside blurring by like a metaphor for the fleeting nature of peace, and Kane leaned forward with eyes alight, promising Billy that this was it, this was the chance to finally put Victor in his place, to finally emerge from the shadow of the mustached dominance. Billy felt the pull, the old intoxicating pull of the fight, and it didn't matter that Sally's voice echoed like a warning bell, or that his family's patience was stretched thin, or that victory, even if it came, would be hollow, because the hunger in his chest was louder than reason. But the question, the only question, was whether he could silence it long enough to choose love over war, or whether Kane's web would snare him once again, dragging him down a path that no reconciliation with Jill, no Abbott intervention, no desperate plea from Sally could undo. And as Victor sat in his office, plotting with the ruthless efficiency of a man who never ran out of enemies to crush, surrounded by cluttered reminders of battles yet to be fought, the pieces moved toward collision. Jack whispering warnings to Nikki, Adam putting Chelsea in impossible positions, Carl struggling to take the high road while suspecting it might be a dead end, Lily mourning Damien while Kane dangled fresh manipulations in front of her, Mariah confronting Daniel as though extracting truth could shield Tessa from temptation, and Billy, ever the tragic gambler, standing on the precipice of yet another self-inflicted fall. His choice not only about business or revenge but about whether he would finally learn that love cannot grow in soil poisoned by vendettas, or whether Sally's greatest fear, that she had tethered her heart to a man who loved his grudges more than he could ever love her, would at last be proven true, setting the stage for a week in Genoa City where every secret, every betrayal, every whispered temptation could ignite a chain reaction no one was prepared to contain. The days that followed Billy's fateful train meeting with Kane were painted in shades of unease, because nothing in Genoa City ever stayed hidden for long. And though Kane's words still echoed in Billy's head like a siren's song, revenge, power, victory, legacy, the reality of what saying yes would cost him began to bleed into every moment, into every sideways glance from Sally, into every Abbott family dinner where silence said more than words, into every night where sleep offered no reprieve, but only replayed Victor's smirk, Kane's grin, and Sally's tearful warnings in an endless loop. And while Billy stumbled through the labyrinth of his decision, Sally herself was unraveling in ways she could no longer disguise, seeking out voices that might steady her. First Diane, who was sympathetic but also wary of speaking too much against her stepson, and then Jack, who knew his brother's destructive patterns better than anyone and who quietly admitted that he feared Billy wasn't simply tempted, he was already half convinced, already sliding toward the abyss, which left Sally feeling like Cassandra in her own relationship, shouting warnings that no one would heed until the devastation had already arrived. And as if her heartbreak wasn't heavy enough, she found herself caught between her own role as a woman in love and her role as a survivor of men who had disappointed her before, knowing that if Billy went through with Kane's offer, it wouldn't just be a business mistake, it would be the moment she realized that her love, her devotion, her second chances, weren't enough to anchor him, and that terrifying truth gnawed at her until she felt almost frantic, torn between walking away preemptively and clinging tighter in the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, this time he would choose her. But Genoa City rarely gave its women the luxury of such clarity, especially when the men in their lives were playing power games that rippled across every household. And meanwhile, Mariah's decision to leave for Boston, though born out of good intentions, already began to corrode the delicate foundation she shared with Tessa, because even though she told herself she was doing this for them, for their daughter, for their future, the confession of her darkest secret, her admission of an attempted murder, hung in the air like smoke that couldn't be cleared, and Tessa, though she tried to put on a brave face, found herself haunted by questions she couldn't speak aloud, wondering whether her wife's darkness might one day resurface, whether the woman she trusted most could also be the woman who might unravel again. And in Mariah's absence, Daniel's presence grew heavier, his bond with Tessa shifting from the casual camaraderie of two people thrown together by circumstance into something softer, deeper, tinged with a yearning neither of them wanted to name. And Daniel himself was at war, not because he sought to betray Mariah, but because loneliness had carved scars into his chest, and Tessa's vulnerability spoke to wounds in him that had never fully healed. And so while Mariah sat on a bus to Boston clutching a bag that felt heavier than her entire body, Tessa and Daniel shared moments that were small but dangerous. Quiet laughter in the park with Aria, whispered reassurances in the face of judgmental neighbors, late-night conversations that stretched too long, voices too low, eyes lingering too much, and all the while, the audience could sense the inevitable fracture coming, because Mariah's trust, placed in Daniel, was a gift he could not return without consequence. And across town Kane was busy weaving his manipulations not only through Billy but through anyone gullible enough to listen, whispering new strategies to Amanda as if his past failures weren't graveyards littered with the bones of broken schemes, organizing so-called brainstorming sessions that reeked of desperation, trying once again to sell himself as the savior of alliances while everyone else remembered the bodies his last grand vision had left behind. And yet somehow, through sheer persistence or the weight of shared history, he began to dig under Lily's armor, reaching into old wounds of grief over Damien and reminding her of a time when his arms were a comfort instead of a cage. And though Devon warned her not to be fooled, not to let herself fall prey to nostalgia, Lily's heart betrayed her, whispering that maybe Kane really had changed, maybe redemption wasn't impossible, and Kane thrived in that sliver of hope like a weed finding sunlight, exploiting every ounce of forgiveness she considered granting, while Billy, caught in the crossfire of Kane's resurgence and Victor's ruthless empire, found his resolve cracking, because for every reason he had to reject Kane's offer, there were two reasons to accept it: Victor's smirk, Sally's doubt, his mother's favoritism toward Kane, his own aching need to finally be the man who brought Newman to his knees. And as he walked the streets of Genoa City, every corner seemed to whisper reminders of the choice looming ahead, from Jack's cautionary gaze to Nikki's clipped warnings, from Adam maneuvering Chelsea into yet another no-win situation to Kyle struggling to embrace the high road while knowing it left him vulnerable, from Phyllis and Michael quietly burying hatchets that had once been too sharp to ignore, to Lauren, ever the romantic, going to great lengths to win Christine over before the wedding. And in this swirl of plots and counterplots, Billy's storyline burned brightest, because everyone could feel the tension tightening, everyone could see the storm gathering, and Sally, at her wit's end, refused to back down, standing toe-to-toe with him, refusing to let her love be sidelined while he courted destruction, her fury as palpable as her fear, while Kane slyly pressed harder, promising not only revenge but reconciliation, dangling Jill like bait, suggesting that if Billy accepted, even his mother would finally see him as worthy. And though the Abbott matriarch's favoritism had long stung Billy, the idea that victory over Victor could also buy his mother's approval was a poisoned gift too tempting to dismiss, and so the stage was set. A week where Billy's every breath carried the potential to reshape not only his life but Sally's, Kane's, Victor's, and the fragile piece of Genoa City itself. Because the truth was that in this town, No decision stayed contained, no action ended at the source, and if Billy chose wrongly, as history suggested he would, then Sally's heart, Mariah's marriage, Lily's hope, and even Jack's loyalty might all splinter in the fallout, leaving the residents of Genoa City once again grappling with the timeless question: how much destruction are we willing to endure in the name of love, revenge, or survival? By midweek, the tension was no longer confined to whispers behind closed doors or worried glances across crowded rooms. It had exploded into open conflict, because Sally, who had spent days watching Billy slip further from her reach, finally reached her breaking point. And the confrontation that unfolded at the Abbott mansion wasn't simply a lover's quarrel, it was the eruption of every doubt, every wound, every betrayal she had ever buried, her voice trembling with fury as she demanded to know if Billy truly valued his thirst for vengeance more than he valued her, more than he valued their future, more than he valued the fragile stability he had clawed his way toward. And Billy, though guilt burned behind his eyes, couldn't give her the reassurance she begged for, because in his heart he had already begun justifying Kane's proposition as destiny, as a test he was meant to face, as the only way to finally silence the shadow of Victor Newman. And Sally saw the truth in his silence, saw the weakness that Kane had exploited, and in that moment she felt herself begin to fracture, whispering through clenched teeth that she wouldn't stand by and watch him throw his life away for the hollow satisfaction of revenge, that she wouldn't be collateral damage in a war she had never wanted to fight. And when she stormed out, the slam of the door reverberated through the Abbott home like a death knell, while upstairs Jack, who had overheard just enough, felt the same old ache of watching his brother destroy something precious in the name of a battle that never ended. And across town Victor Newman was already preparing his counterstrike, because the whispers of Kane's plan had reached him through channels he rarely admitted to having, and Victor, who had faced more threats than most men could survive, recognized immediately that this was not about business, it was personal. It was Billy Abbott once again trying to assert himself as a player in a game he was too reckless to win. And Victor's fury was a quiet, measured kind, the kind that manifested in endless phone calls, secret meetings, and a flurry of strategies that left his desk littered with contracts, notes, and contingency plans, because Victor Newman never underestimated an enemy, not even one as inconsistent as Billy, and if Kane thought he could use Billy as a pawn to topple the mustache, then both men were about to learn the fatal mistake of underestimating a predator in his prime. And while this high-stakes battle brewed, Mariah's absence cast a longer and longer shadow over Tessa, whose evenings with Daniel had shifted from innocent companionship to something heavier, filled with unspoken tension and moments where a touch lingered too long, a laugh felt too intimate, an eye contact too piercing. And though Tessa told herself it was harmless, she could feel the ground shifting beneath her, could feel the danger of building reliance on a man who wasn't hers. And Daniel, for his part, wrestled with guilt and temptation, torn between loyalty to Mariah and his own gnawing loneliness, until even Arya seemed to sense the unsteadiness, fussing more whenever Mariah's name was mentioned, and these small cracks threatened to widen into chasms, because Mariah's trust was a fragile gift, and when she eventually returned from Boston, she might find her world already altered in ways she could never forgive. And back in the Abbott orbit, Kane doubled down, weaving new promises, reminding Billy of every humiliation at Victor's hands, reminding him of every time Sally had doubted him, planting seeds of paranoia by suggesting that maybe Sally's love was conditional, maybe she would only ever support him when he played it safe. And Billy, fragile and furious, clung to those words, even as his conscience whispered that he was on the edge of destroying everything. And as if fate enjoyed the cruelty, Jill herself was drawn back into the fold, with Kane slyly orchestrating a reunion that placed mother and son in the same room, forcing Billy to hear his mother's disappointment cloaked in backhanded encouragement, making him wonder if Kane was right, if this was the only way to finally claim the respect he had craved all his life. And by the week's end, Genoa City felt like a powder keg ready to explode, Sally alone in her heartbreak, Billy torn between love and vengeance, Kane feeding the fire, Victor sharpening his knives, Mariah unknowingly jeopardizing her family, Tessa on the brink of temptation, Daniel caught in a moral quicksand, Lily wavering under the weight of old love and new grief, and Jack warning anyone who would listen that the storm was coming, though even he could not predict just how devastating the fallout would be when Billy finally made his choice. By Friday, the air in Genoa City felt electric, the kind of tension that prickled skin and made even the most seasoned players glance over their shoulders, because Billy's silence had stretched too long, his refusal to confirm or deny Kane's offer becoming its own kind of answer, and Sally, exhausted from pleading, finally confided in Chloe, admitting that she didn't know if she had the strength to keep fighting for a man determined to chase his ruin. And Chloe, ever blunt, told her that love wasn't supposed to feel like a war zone, planting yet another seed of doubt in Sally's mind, while across town Kane gloated in private, convinced that he had maneuvered Billy into his corner, already envisioning the downfall of Victor Newman as if it were guaranteed. But Kane's arrogance blinded him to the predator circling unseen, because Victor had set his trap with ruthless precision, leveraging Adam, recruiting Michael for legal firepower, and even drawing on Nikki's quiet insights to anticipate Kane's every move. And when word reached Victor that Jill had been pulled into this charade, his fury hardened into something colder, something that promised no mercy, because family was his greatest motivator and Kane had dared to use Jill as bait. And meanwhile, Daniel and Tessa's connection deepened with a dangerous inevitability, one evening stretching into a confession that neither wanted to voice, that they felt safer, calmer, understood in each other's company, and though nothing physical had yet passed between them, the emotional intimacy was already a betrayal waiting to explode. And Mariah, still away, sensed none of it, leaving the audience to dread the heartbreak looming when she returned. And back in the Abbott world, Billy finally stood before a mirror, staring at the reflection of a man he barely recognized, his face etched with conflict, his chest tight with the knowledge that whatever choice he made would define not only his own future but the lives of everyone tethered to him. And the cruel irony was that even as he weighed love against vengeance, he could not escape the haunting certainty that either path would cost him something irreplaceable. And so the week ended not with resolution but with a cliffhanger. Billy, phone in hand, staring at Kane's number, Sally alone in her apartment wiping away angry tears, Victor smiling that thin, dangerous smile as if he already knew the ending, Tessa and Daniel leaning just a little too close over a sleeping Aria, and Genoa City holding its collective breath for the inevitable explosion.